This past spring, it was announced that Steve Kurkjian, long of the Boston Globe, Paul Pronovost, or Pronovo, I'm not quite sure how he pronounces his name, of the Cape Cod Times, Naomi Shallett, and John Christie of the Maine Center for Public Interest Reporting were to be inducted into the New England Newspaper Hall of Fame in Portland, Maine. It struck me as highly significant that a full 50% of the 4 honorees are Armenian Americans, Steve Kurkjian and John Christie. 3 of the 4 honorees are with us tonight because not only are John and Steve in the house, but also Naomi Shallett, who by a remarkable coincidence happens to be married to John Christie. Making them a formidable husband and wife team of Hall of Fame journalists. Steve Kurkjian, sorry Steve, but you fall into the category now of he needs no introduction. However, just to keep up formalities, Steve is a 3-time Pulitzer Prize winner who has made major contributions over his long career as an investigative reporter at the Boston Globe, most notably as a founding member of the Globe's legendary Spotlight team. They should make a movie about that, Steve, shouldn't they? He's also the author of Master Thieves, the Boston gangsters who pulled off the world's greatest art heist, and in his spare time, Steve has been a member of NAASR's board of directors since 2003. John Christie is an award-winning journalist who's worked as a reporter, editor, and publisher for newspapers in Massachusetts, Florida, and Maine. He's the editor of the bestseller Andrew, Savagery from the Sea, and his work has appeared in the Boston Globe, Boston Magazine, Yankee Magazine, the Boston Phoenix, and WBUR, and elsewhere. And he's the author of the memoir, The Prince of Wentworth Street, An American Boyhood in the Shadow of Genocide. And with Naomi, he founded the investigative news service, the Maine Center for Public Interest Reporting. Because I think I'm not wrong in stating that for this audience, Steve is very well known, and John may be slightly less so, I want to say a few more words about John, and if I may, to be a little bit personal. I've known Steve for more than 25 years, and I've only known John for about 6 years, I think. But there's a deep connection between his family and my family that goes back many years before I was born. John first appeared on my radar in 2019 when I saw an article he published on WBOR.com called "My Grandmother Escaped the Armenian Genocide, but She Never Forgot." Reading the article, it quickly became clear that although I didn't know John, I knew his family. Because you see, like me, John grew up in the town of Dover, New Hampshire. And there are only a handful or so of Armenian families in Dover, which means everybody knows everybody. I remembered his grandmother, Rose Banyan. I knew his mother, Kay Banyan Christie. His mother babysat my mother and aunt and remained friends with them throughout her life. And growing up in a place like Dover, which is not physically far from the Armenian world of Greater Boston in terms of miles, but is very much removed from it in other respects, it gives you a different perspective and a sense of what it means to be an Armenian American. So when I read John's excellent memoir, it really resonated with me in deep ways. I should mention, by the way, I don't think I have, that these 2 excellent books are available in our bookstore. And there will be an opportunity after our program winds down for you to go downstairs to the bookstore and purchase them, and I'm sure they would be very happy to sign the books for you. So, it seemed like a no-brainer to bring together these 2 outstanding journalists and great guys to have a conversation about growing up in and out of the Armenian community, about our identity, and about journalism. And that's what we're going to do, like it or not. So please welcome John Christie and Steve Kurkjian. Are we good?
I think so. I'm fine.
Would you like to say anything as an opener, gentlemen?
I would. I would.
I had a funny feeling you might.
This building, and so many of you are part of my Armenian experience. I came into this building in the early 90s at the invitation of Mamigonian, the chair of the building, when it was only Mamigonian, was here day in and day out. And he had heard I had gone to Armenia, to historic Armenia, to eastern Turkey with my father, and I was struggling with writing a piece about that experience. I knew very little about our shared history. In fact, I remember sitting in the back of the bus with. I'll give it to John in a second. But
It's okay, Steve. We got all the time in the world.
Yeah, thank you. I remember sitting in the back of the bus with Armin Avorian, who was our leader, with another family, and my father and I. And my father, I am now my father's age when he went on this trip to visit the historic sites of historic Armenia and my father's village and my father's then empty plot of land that my father's home was on. It was a memorable experience, and still, I'm shocked I was able to, speak lucidly about it at all, and to write about it. And I came here and spoke with Mamigonian. Both he and Armin was so helpful in me learning our shared history, both tragic, as my father's life had been in coming to this new world, and then amazingly resourceful. It wasn't just, I named the article, I titled the article Roots of Sorrow, but within the past 5 years realized it needed a subhead, and that would be Seeds of Hope. Because, I know we're here to talk about journalism and chasing down bad guys and revealing the truth in the front page of the Boston Globe, but really, my most memorable experience as a journalist was spent in those 2.5 weeks learning about our history right from the soil, right from the faces. My cousin Armin Kasparian, surgeon, is here today, and as we went through one of the cities, I looked at a guy and I said, "Armin, what are you doing here?" And it wasn't Armin, of course. He was at Mount Auburn doing his surgeries. But the faces of our faces. And I'm so appreciative of the guidance and the information and the history that I was provided here all these years later. And I've written about my family's Armenian experience, but I'm also now going to, because of the appreciation I have towards Carol and Mugar and also other members of my family, I'm even going to write about the success that we, the diaspora, has had as a people here, especially here. Mark Oslin is here with us tonight, and if you don't know his website on the Armenian Genealogy Project, get busy in it. You'll spend a whole weekend on it, finding out when your family came here, when your parents came here and grandparents came here, and you will get the same sense of pride, understanding how they came And within a couple of weeks, couple of months, a couple of years, had their business, had their church, had their home, and as Mark has determined, that mile from Watertown Square to Sevon's Bakery, that was the most densely populated Armenian district in America. Think of it, right here. You and I would live there. So, thank you, thank you, Mike.
No, I knew we were going to have a hard time drawing you out, Steve, but thanks for making an effort.
Thank you for coming.
John.
Mark, you're probably the only one in here who will understand what I'm going to say now, because you grew up where I grew up, where there were no Armenian faces. I'm looking around, and this is amazing to me. I don't get to see the faces of my family in these numbers ever in my life, except the 2 times I've been here. So, to me, the point I want to make is that I'm so happy to be included here as a man with the name John Christie, Irish father, in this group, and to see my aunts and my uncles and my grandmother, Galenia, my mother, Kuharig, and know that I'm not alone. So thank you, Mark, for finding out about me and getting me involved in all this. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. So let's, first of all, again, we congratulate you on the induction into the New England Newspaper Hall of Fame. Just as journalists, as professionals, what does this kind of recognition mean to you? We'll start with John.
Well, the kind of journalism I've always practiced, and my wife Naomi's practice, and Steve's practice, is a classical stuff. This stuff in which there is no ideology, no partisanship, a strong, I call it a religious belief in the value of journalism to give you the information you need to make your decision. I'm not talking about opinions and editorials. I'm talking about the news stories, the front page, the real news stuff. And when we got this recognition, I know Steve's work, I know my work, my wife's work, I know the fourth fellow, I know his work. We all believed in that kind of journalism. The kind of journalism I feel is a little bit being neglected now. We're not here to make something happen. We're here to give you the information for you to make something happen. And I'm really pleased that the kind of journalism we all practice was recognized.
When Mark mentioned the Spotlight team, which during my early days at the Globe, I was asked to join, and we did a smaller project. It became a bigger project, and became that biggest project that the Globe had that year was on some nepotism and corruption in the city of Somerville. It was front page story, and it caused such changes, the changes that the public demanded in Somerville. And to this day, I say, the reason why Somerville is such a successful community now was for 2 reasons. That in 1971, the Boston Globe Spotlight team did a 7-part series, and Steve's Ice Cream was located that same year in Somerville. It brought people to Somerville. After a year or two, Mayor Kevin White, had a very good relationship with our then editor, Tom Winship, and he said something to Winship that I always felt was very important about the work we do and that investigative reporters do. He said, it's not the stories that they do that is the greatest advantage. It's that people in my city hall, all these 4,000 people, they're worried if they do something askew, that the Spotlight team is going to find out, and they'll be on the front page of the Globe. And so it's the preventative work of the effect of the Spotlight team that has its greatest effect. And I like that. I like that people say. You know me. Those of you who know me know I always have a smile on my face, and it's not because I caught someone. It's just because that's my nature. But when I'm on a story, it's not a pretty sight. I need the information. I needed to present it to my public, the Globe readers.
So maybe you guys just answered this, but what drew you to journalism as a profession in the first place? Was it what you always had your eye on, or did
No.
you drift into it?
I like that question. So
you
I'll
very
answer it
much.
first, Mark. It was growing up in Dorchester, growing up in a lower middle class but vibrant neighborhood where there were, in my block, there were very few, if any other, Armenians. But it was being able to get to know and get to learn how to discuss and learn about the other families that just interested me in their experiences in making the city. This was not a very, let me say, powerful. This is not South Boston. This was not West Roxbury. These were all sort of the lower middle class, if not less. And everybody was working, and everybody was struggling to get their kids into the best schools and get them on, on the tracks of the American dream. But it was there that they didn't have a break. Somebody wasn't looking out for them. I always thought, when I came onto the Globe, we can make a difference here. The work I do can have an effect.
Yeah, I was a working class kid from a little town in Dover. I had no idea what a journalist was or anything.
What do you mean, you didn't read Foster's Daily Democrat and get your...
Foster's Daily Democrat, but I didn't read much of it. I only read the sports pages. So when I went to school, I wanted to be a lawyer because I thought, well, that's a pretty cool thing to be a lawyer. Go to work in a jacket and tie, not like my dad in work clothes. And I signed up for a class about how to write, thinking, well, lawyers need how to write, don't they? They don't, actually. Most lawyers I know couldn't write very well. But I got lucky. The professor turned out to be a Pulitzer Prize-winning professor and the founder of the writing coach movement. For years, he wrote a great column at the Globe. His name is Darnell M. Murray. He was a writing coach at the Globe. I luck into the greatest writing teacher in the country. And he takes an interest in me. And I didn't know how to write, but he encouraged me. And one day he said, why don't you go down to the school newspaper? They're looking for writers. So the school newspaper had a really dumb name called the New Hampshire. This is the University of New Hampshire. The paper was called The New Hampshire. So I go down to the little newsroom and say, Professor Murray said I should come down here and get a story. And the editor, a woman like 3 years ahead of me, said, okay, give this kid a story. They give me the story they assigned me is to go to the agricultural school for the annual livestock fair and write a story. I thought they meant it. It was a gag. No one wanted that story. So I get up early in the morning, which anybody knows me knows I don't do very well, and went to the ag school, took notes, talked to people, got who run the best calf of the year, and came back, gave them a story, and they went, well, you wrote the story, let's put it in the newspaper. And there it is, Ag School Results by John Christie. My God, that's all I needed. I saw my name. I got an entree, a shy kid, got an entree into the real world, who was going to go into the real world and find out what happened and bring him back and tell you. And that was exciting for me, and that's what got me into it, and I stayed with it and stayed with it. This professor, I had other courses with him, and he became quite a mentor to me. And it was a way to be in the world that I wasn't going to be able to figure out how to do myself. And it's been very rewarding.
If I could have one more early story that tied my Armenianness into my...
Are you anticipating questions, Steve?
My interest. I don't think you would ask me.
Oh, go ahead.
I had a little office in the newsroom, and I'd often get calls from people, and Boston's such a tribal city. It's much better now, but then it was so divided. I had black friends. We didn't go to eat, who worked for the mayor. We didn't go to eat in the North End because black kids could not get, they get taunted if they went into the North End. The South Boston kids did not go into to East Boston, and likewise. Well, I would answer the phone with Steve Kurkjian, and you'd hear a pause, and it'd say, Kurkjian, what nationality? Everyone, what nationality you are, nationality. I say, I'm Armenian, thinking they're never going to, what's that? You're not Irish, you're not Italian, not Jewish. So, Armenian, and invariably, you hear a pause. My landlord was Armenian. And when it was tough for us, when we were growing up, he let the rent ride for a couple of months. My doctor was Armenian. He came to visit the house when my mother got out of surgery. Came to the house to visit her. And that invariably, I mean, what is it about us that that is, you know, has such good regard in the community? And so I went out into the world and did well, but it was always connecting with someone who had read a story, from Omaha, Nebraska, whatever, especially when the internet came out. Kurkjian, tell me, people would call, families from throughout the country. Tell us about your background. Who are you? How are you Armenian? Where does your family come from? And it's always been such a proud part of my identity. The other story I want to tell about the nepotism of Boston. I had gone to 4 years of college, majored in English, had worked at the college newspaper, at the Boston University College newspaper. And I hit the ground. My mother told me, you're not going to make it as a newsman because it's not going to make enough money. You can have a couple of years, have some fun, but you better get some degree, a master's degree. So I went to law school while I went looking for a job in journalism. Well, I found my way up to the State House News Service, which was a private news service run by a gentleman named Paul Ryan, who also was a Dorchester resident. And I sat down in a chair. I was fighting for a job that was going to pay $45 a week. Now understand, I've had 4 years of good writing experience. And he says, Kurkjian. He says, oh, where are you from? I said, Codman Square in Dorchester. Uh-huh. You know Casper Brothers Market? I says, yes, those are that's my four uncles. Oh, that's where I shop. That's your sheet over there. So in the end, no matter how good a journalist experience I had, it was that's how Boston works. It's the wink and the nod.
So this does actually connect with what I wanted to ask Steve, which is that you grew up the two of you grew up in different places, different kinds of places, Dover and Dorchester, although they both begin with D-O. They're very different places, but neither of them is exactly the heart of the Armenian community.
No, very much
Dover less so even than Dorchester, but nevertheless. So can you go back in your minds to reflect on what it meant to you, or if you even thought about it when you were growing up being Armenian? What did that mean anything to you? Did you have any self-consciousness about being Armenian, and how did that manifest itself?
I'll take the questions because I'll remember it, John. You'll remember the questions. Yes, there was a separation, and I feel, my next door neighbor was an Armenian, but my cousins were down the street and around the corner. But we went to church, and our church was First Armenian Church in Porter Square, which, as maybe one or two may remember, suffered a tragic loss during the hurricane of 1954, remember? And
Yes,
and then it moved to across the street in Belmont.
Deadheight Mogadichit was the original. And then the First Armenian Church invited us in for a while, and then we have this beautiful church across the street. But I was always aware and attentive to, but my dad and mother did not urge me to learn Armenian or to be part of have an Armenian experience. Both, knew that if I was going to make it in the world, it would have to be in the American world, and that's where they urged me to pay attention.
When you're a kid, you get asked, what are you? And the answer should be, whatever your ethnic group is. And I answer honestly, I said, well, I'm Irish and Armenian. What's an Armenian? Well, that's a country it's sort of in Russia, but it's not in Russia. We're not Russian. And what's that? Why does your grandmother have a big thing of grape leaves behind her house? You put food in that and eat it? Well, yeah, it's really good. I don't ever feel I was put down because of it. I think partly because working with pretty nice people. As a guy, I played ball, knew everybody, and got along well. And I had this Irish name. So when in doubt, it's one of those guys. I went to Catholic school and in Mass and all that all the time. But I would think there's a more subtle effect it had on me. And there wasn't a lot of talk about the genocide, but there wasn't no talk about it. And as I wrote in my book, there didn't have to be a lot of talk because I don't know where that picture is in the book anymore. Yeah, the book. Look at my grandmother's eyes. That's all I need to know. That was a sad woman. That was a sad woman who was lovely and warm and treated me so beautifully, but she was sad. A lot had happened to her. You know these stories. I don't need to tell you the stories. And I think that meant something to me emotionally that helped maybe be a better reporter. Steve's always smiling. I wish I said by myself, not always smiling, but I think both of us have a lot of empathy. We listen to people, we talk to people. We don't want to be judged by the color of our skin. If I had an uncle, by the way, his nickname was Licky. Why was his nickname Licky? He was so dark, the kids called him Licorice Stick. And that was the nickname that stuck.
Wow.
But I didn't want to be seen only by my identity. I wanted to be seen as an individual because I can see what happens to people when they're grouped by other people. And I think that made me be a better reporter when I would talk to someone and they were, name the gender, name the race, name the color, name the ethnic background. I didn't think of them first that way. I waited to see who they were and what they were like and try to judge them as an individual. And I think a lot of that came from the empathy I had and from the history of my family.
Did you ever, my experience growing up in Dover is a few years later, but I don't think substantially different. But when I was in school, I felt like, maybe this came from my parents, but one of my jobs was to be, tell people about what it means to be Armenian. Every year do some kind of, project or presentation or something to let people know, hey, Armenian is a thing. This is because otherwise nobody knew from Armenians in Dover.
I never got asked to do that, but I'll tell you one story that it was useful. Practically speaking, I was at the State House also for some time and aware of my background, and one day they announced it was going to be the first ever Genocide Remembrance Day at the State House, sponsored by Katie Dukakis, who's Jewish, and George Kavarian.
Right.
George, state senator. And I was the only reporter who went because it was the first time and it wasn't controversial. It was something serious. And I got to know Dukakis somewhat, but I got to know George a lot better. So it was being an Armenian, going to the ceremony, meeting George, I got myself a nice source at the State House.
So, House Speaker.
What about then later in your lives and professional and personal lives? I mean, when you're young professionals trying to make a name, later when you've established yourselves, and then now that you're lauded Hall of Famers, did your sense of your identity as Armenians evolve in any ways, or do you feel like you're still the same as you were as a kid?
Interesting. I never thought about that, Mark. When I went to Washington in the mid-'80s, and I spent 6 years there, and learned about the assembly, the Armenian Assembly, but we still were not, Armenia has never been a critical priority on the national front. So I went and spoke with the various members of the upper top of the assembly, and you just could not sell Armenia and the Armenian priorities in Congress. I tried. I spoke to Senator Kennedy on a couple of occasions, but the earthquake in 1988 stopped everything. And to me, that was the moment in time that people understood the importance of Armenia as a central place in this then still the Soviet Union. Gorbachev was here. He was here negotiating with President Reagan, who was about to leave because President Bush was taking over. But 25,000 people, our brethren, our sisters from another mother, who were killed in this awful, awful. But we responded. Where was the bylines were coming out of Boston because of the work that was done by the Milk Fund and all of you and your older brothers and sisters in stepping up, contributing, and the tragedy of that event was front page news, and to see how we responded, I tell you, it stayed on the front page of the Boston Globe for weeks, and it made me proud. I tried to get there. I was unsuccessful in getting there because they needed to get more food and clothing over. But it was an important day. Armenia mattered at that moment in time, again, because of a tragedy.
Well, being Armenian meant a lot to me, very lot, as a journalist, but can I expand that and say as a writer, because where it mattered the most to me was as a writer, not writing daily news, but writing a book. At a certain point in my life, I had felt a little, I had lost I had retired, I didn't have the job anymore, my son was grown up, I wasn't married, I lost some of my identity. And I started thinking to myself, well, wait a minute, this is a good time to re-examine who I really am. Mm. And that's when it just struck me, well, I'm an Armenian. What does that mean to me? What is that all about? How do I find out more about it? So that's where my Armenianness came into my writing life even more than when I was a day in, day out journalist. And that's what I've got to find out about. I know my grandmother had something happen to her. What happened to her? And that's when I went back and did and said, okay, I'm an investigative reporter like Steve. I am going to investigate myself and my history. And that led me to, I think, one of the best piece of writing I ever did.
Yeah, I mean, I realize there are lots of investigative reporters who aren't Armenian, but the fact that the two of you are investigative reporters, it's hard for me not to think that that has something to do with your sense of your families and national history, that you wanted to know things that were not being told. Am I wrong in making that leap?
The phrase that was impressed upon me from the start was lose your arm before you lose your name. And the sense of importance of what you do carries on to your family, your community, your people. That's the thing that was drilled into me, not the feeling of disadvantage. I never felt that. I felt until last year my proudest achievement is by being a 10-year-old All-Star for the Dorchester Little League. That's what I remember most as being my badge of honor. But that was baseball. That was American baseball. And I always felt really part of my community. Proud that I'm Armenian, proud of my Armenian history and family and community. But the thing that drove me into investigative reporting and feeling this is important, work harder, go deeper, is the fairness involved of a democracy that prides itself in being fair, but too often is misses the mark.
Yeah, we both have this devotion to democracy that I'm a six with Steve, speak for Naomi, we're very proud that we have a role in democracy. I get to have a job that helps democracy survive, we hope. But I will say with the Armenian aspect of it, when your family, your history, your group, their history's been denied and still denied, that's an incentive to want to find out what really happened and to publish it. And one of the great parts about publishing my book was to have people say, hey, I didn't know that happened. If one person said that to me, I felt I made a contribution. And it wasn't one person, it was many people said that. I didn't know that's what happened. I heard about something, never knew much about it. It's horrible, how come it's not recognized? So I feel my investigative skills got put to good use, and I made a little tiny dent in letting people know what happened.
Now,
But I will say one more thing. I don't know why we're not discussing one other thing, the Deverish trade.
yeah, I mean, we obviously.
I
we
thought
could
that
do-
was going to be on the agenda.
I mean, we got to get the Globe on that. I guess the Globe is on that. I've been reading. Yes, there's a lot of things to be upset about in the world, John. But I sort of promised we weren't going to get political, but since you've both raised the issue, you're journalists. You're proud to be journalists. You take pride in your own work and in the fact of journalists and their role. This is a time in our country and in other countries where journalists are being depicted as the enemy. How do you, I mean, I don't know how to even ask this question except to say, how do you deal with this?
Right. Well, the Globe proudly remains one of the best papers in the country, and in its politics, if anybody who's picked it up day in and day out, is very liberal, very critical, very skeptical of President Trump and the whole MAGA movement. But to pick up on a point John made, is the investigative reporting on the effect of MAGA, on what the effect of the changes that were put in during the first 4 Trump administration. Those have had a negative effect on our industries, on our environment, on our health and safety. And that's those stories, because we too often cover the immediate, those investigative stories aren't being done. So that the real impact of an administration that has reduced regulation, has advanced a very negative impact on bipartisanship. It's that the impact of that hasn't been that has not been focused on.
Let me, apologies, steer it back to journalism, though.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
No, I mean, the fact that journalists and the profession of journalism, journalists and investigative journalists used to be heroic figures. Now, do you worry that for the next generation or generations that people aren't going to want to be journalists because they're being shown as
It's just more noise. When you come in and you say, I've always said this to the kids when I go in and do some educational work with young journalists, the most powerful sentence in the English language is this: I'm Steve Kurkjian from the Boston Globe, and I want ... When I have a newspaper that has such a history, and I know the piece of information that I need to publish a story that'll be wind up on the front page and people will respond to, that's an immense sense of importance and change. And so
Jesus,
I'm
you're an
worried.
upbeat guy.
Yeah, I'm worried about the effect of Trumpism, over the next 4 years. But it may for another year it'll happen. Democrats, I think, will retake the House. Impeachments will, and the whole impetus will towards removal. That'll be the next 2 years, the following 2 years, and I just don't think he's going to have as much effect that people are worried about.
Okay, welcome to MSNBC. John?
Yeah, I'm disinterested in who wins elections. Truly disinterested. That's not uninterested. You know what that means? That means I take no stake in it. That's a real reporter. Now, the threat you're talking about is the enemy of the people, the enemy, the press is the enemy.
Yes.
I'm not terribly worried about it, except in a couple of cases where electronic media needs government approval, CBS, the merger and all that. That's bad. That is a real threat. But the printed press, which is also online, doesn't need any government approval. All we need is guts, and we have them. Just don't be intimidated. We're not intimidated. The problem we have is that we're not making enough money. We need to be more successful financially. Because if you're successful financially, you can withstand the threats. And that concerns me because what's going on to the legacy part of the business is we're in decline for the most part. There's only a few papers left that are making any money. So that's one concern. The second concern is totally opposite of what you're talking about. And I'll give you a story. A friend of mine at the Providence Journal, a very good reporter, Tom, I saw him the other day for a while. He said, I've been teaching for 17 years at a Ivy League college in Rhode Island. And it's been going great. I just quit. I told the students, I'm going to bring in someone, this is a typical classroom practice. I'll bring in a real person who knows something. You students all interview him or her and write a story about it. This is how we learn journalism. The guy I'm going to bring in is an undercover state cop who would undercover the mafia.
Oh.
Good story. So, we'd be excited as reporters. We would have been.
Into that.
Oh, we're not going to interview him, they said. He's a policeman. He's a man. He's white. We're not going to do that. We refuse to do it. My biggest concern is too much ideology into journalism. I worry about throwing our credibility. The public wants us to make sure Trump doesn't win an election. That's not our job. Our job is to give you the information, and you decide who wins the election. New York Times is under all this pressure. They're helping Trump. They're helping Trump. And so if we lose our credibility by becoming in one person's side or the other, there's nothing left to our business. I have a different concern than Steve does.
Are there questions from the audience? Dr. Myrak.
Wait. Could you just introduce him, please?
Dr. Robert Myrak.
My question is, where did you get the Yallen tree?
All right, now we're getting to the heart of the matter. The Yalanchi came from Eastern Lamajun in Belmont, Massachusetts. This is a free advertisement. I hope you're asking because you enjoyed it, Bob. Excellent. Good.
I'm glad I didn't see you back there, Dr. Merrick. We are honored by your presence here tonight. Your book has given us such information about our history in coming to America, published in 1983. And as I learned from Mamigonian, Dr. Myrak was decided to concentrate on the Armenian in coming to America, diaspora coming to America, because of Manuk. Dr. Myrak was going to do another ethnicity. And Mamigonian, our original director, said to him, why don't you think about doing the Armenians? And as a result, the book that should be is beside our family Bible in every one of our homes. Is Dr. Maric's book.
Torn Between Two Lands, you can buy it in the NAASR bookstore. Are there other non-Meze related questions? Yes.
So, I'm John's wife, and I'm actually going to remind you of a story that you should tell. And that
Please
is-
stand up, Naomi.
There. The story is where your journalistic understanding of how the world works and your Armenianness came together when something was about to happen in the Maine State House.
Yeah, if I can remember the details now, unexpectedly, the Turks were having all kinds of lobbying going on in the Maine State House. Every year they passed a resolution on recognizing the Armenian genocide. Fairly standard resolution, nice wording. Everybody votes yes, and we get a little attention. The Turkish government, their lobbyist, I think out of the consulate here, told people, if you have any details, help me out a little bit. They said, they asked them not to do it, and they threatened them, didn't they?
They did, and they also brought a whole bunch of legislators to Turkey prior to
Right,
asking
right.
them not to pass the resolution.
And I made sure we got a story out about it.
Yes,
Ah,
and they passed the resolution.
yeah.
Yeah.
Very
Very
good.
good. Yeah.
Yes, Judy, please stand.
Okay, hi. Thank you, this is great. I'm enjoying the discussion. When you brought that up, I just wanted to ask you, have you heard about, again, in the Maine State Legislature, what's been happening with the Azerbaijani, alleged foreign, unregistered foreign agent who has been working against the Armenians in Maine on a regular, over the last several years, and now there are several news outlets in Maine that have written articles about the fact that he took several legislatures to Azerbaijan, and in fact to Nagorno-Karabakh, Artsakh, and they were wined and dined, and they came back with glowing reports about Azerbaijan. So it's the current, this is being repeated. I didn't realize this had happened earlier with the Turkish government. So they're following the same playbook, and as I said, this is an unregistered foreign agent. There are lots of questions about it. So I wondered if you had heard about this and what you might.
I have heard about it, and how can I say this without boasting? I happen to also be a member of the Maine Armenian Hall of Fame, by the way, and the Armenian Cultural Association there has been very helpful with. I've done some work for them in terms of oral histories, and they've helped with my book, and I have advised them on that issue a couple times.
So when are they going to have a New Hampshire Armenian Hall of Fame, John? Can we establish that? and vote ourselves in?
Steve and I just want to be in Cooperstown. This is the second best choice.
That's it, yeah.
Anyone else? Yes, Paul.
Both of these fine gentlemen I've known over the years, particularly Steve, and each of you are proud proud Armenians, and you've had great success and been wonderful ambassadors for our community. One of the things I'm always interested in is successful people overcoming the issues and problems associated with their career. It takes a certain amount of emotional resilience to do so. Careers are not always this way. They're usually jagged.
Right.
Now, I was wondering if each of you gentlemen could sort of respond to the problems or issues that you had as journalists, and how did you overcome them, and how did you sort of succeed in despite those problems? Do you have any examples of anything of that sort?
Have you found the paintings, is what he really wants to know, Steve.
No, I haven't done that. It's an interesting question. The globe was always divided into those who had graduated from Ivy League colleges but very early on, deciding, having covered in the summer of '69, Woodstock and the Chappaquiddick, Senator Kennedy's accident, Chappaquiddick, immediately recognized as inside the globe. So I never felt a sense of second class or having to climb on any walls. I had just a really, to have family, classmates, friends from the neighborhood still within the community, and to be able to call on them as sources, as resources. The best example I can remember is the Bank of America had been fined $200 million for allegedly doing some small minor matter with currency transactions back in the early 1980s. And it just didn't sound right. There was some other story that was missing. And somebody said there may be something in the North End that has a clue on it. So I called a classmate who grew up in the North End, and I said, Carl, what's going on at the branch? And he said, oh, the head teller and the manager have been fired last week. I said, well, what's going on? He said, we're just chatting here, right, Steve? That's what we're doing here, Carl, just chatting.
Yeah, not taking notes.
The Angiulo brothers were laundering their and that was Boston's criminal the gang that they headed that gang. They've been laundering money through that bank for the last 40 years, and it's come to light. And the explanation that the bank gave and the U.S. Attorney gave for why they've been fined, that's not it. So within the next 24 hours, we had the story on the front page. But how do you get those stories? Is having, you've got to be able to understand the jigsaw puzzle and how to put it together and where to go. It's always considered like a game of pick up sticks, which we played in our living rooms, and which stick to pick up so the others aren't disturbed. I love that game. And I had contacts that people who knew me, knew my family, knew my cousins. Okay, I'll meet you at the back door and I'll show you what's really going on.
I think it's a workplace question, if I got to understand. It could be the newsroom, could be the accounting office, whatever. And I'm thinking, it's a good question. I've had time to think about it. And I think the lesson, the obstacle was you're a reporter or you're an entry-level position in any company, and the attitude of your fellow employees often is don't trust management or a newsroom, don't trust the editors. And I took an opposite approach. I knew they had a hard job too, and I listened to my managers. I was attracted to and paid attention to the good ones. And one day I was at a paper in Florida, and I said, how come you got this new job? We wanted it too, but you, how come you? I said, well, you know the old saying in the Army, don't volunteer? BS. Yep. Volunteer.
Right.
I volunteered. They said, can you fix the photo problem, John? Yes, I can, Mr. Editor. Can you make sure Sunday's well organized? Yes, I can, Mr. Editor. That was a lesson I learned. Don't have a negative attitude towards your bosses. Yeah, some of them deserve it. But work over it, find the good ones, and you'll get ahead.
Yeah. The newsroom is one major, gigantic opportunity for young, energetic individuals who just want to do it right, get the story right.
Gentlemen, thank you. This has been great.
Thank you.
Congratulations. Nice recognition among, I'm sure, many other outstanding recognitions of your great work. A reminder, did I mention that their books are for sale in the bookstore downstairs? 20% off tonight. Please do get a copy and get it signed if you would like to pop downstairs, and Setene will help you in the bookstore.
We get some, one, two.
Oh, sorry, I skipped. Yes, Hapet.
This is sort of a peripheral question that I've always wanted to ask, but never been in a forum with two distinguished journalists or the appropriate. In the late 1980s, early 1990s, I worked on a project for a former company, you may remember, Eastman Kodak, developing the first commercial digital camera. The first purchases of it were Associated Press and a few other companies like them. My question in general is, do you guys think that digital photography had any sort of a positive or even negative impact on journalism over the years? It must have shown up in the work that you've done.
Yeah, I supervise photographers quite often, so I think I would say positive because, you know, when you got a roll of film, you're thinking about, hey, rolls of film cost money. I got 3 assignments. I don't have time to change my roll of 36 or whatever it is. We have digital, you have unlimited chances for frames, which complicates the editing process, as you might know, but gives you a much better chance of getting a good photo. So I think the quality of the photography and the truthfulness of the photography probably had a good improvement with digital.
I never got in the way of my photographers. I never asked them what they were doing.
I'm a
where
work
they
guy.
were going. I had enough to do, so I can't add more than John.
Thank you for doing that, by the way. It was very good. Saved a lot of money on film.
Before I invite you to migrate back to the solarium for coffee and dessert and what have you, and to chat with our guests of honor, could I ask current NAASR board members to stand? And can I ask prior NAASR board members also to stand and be recognized? Thank you. And before we break up current and past NAASR board members, please come forward and let's take a picture. And if there are members of Steve and John's family, and I know there are some here, please come forward and we'll take pictures as well. Everybody else, get the heck out of here and go have something in the solarium. Thank you so much for being here and for your support.